Let me ask you an important question about judicial power.
Yeah.
Now, no one denies that sometimes the Supreme Court gets the Constitution wrong.
Yes.
They're not infallible. As one of your competitors says, they're the Supreme Court, not the supreme being. They were certainly wrong in the Dred Scott decision, which prohibited Congress from banning slavery in the federal territories. They were wrong to overturn worker protection legislation in 1905 in Lochner against New York. And then they were again tragically wrong in Roe versus Wade in 1973, creating the abortion license. And now this year they've done it again, another tragic mistake in imposing same-sex marriage on the entire country in its decision in Obergefell versus Hodges. So my question is going to be about how a president or senator should respond to the Supreme Court when it usurps the authority of the people and their elected representatives by issuing edicts that lack any warrant in the text or logic or original understanding of the Constitution. And I want to make this question really quite specific, Senator. Some people say that a president must always accept the court's interpretation of the Constitution, no matter how dubious that interpretation is, that we have to treat it as the law of the land, binding not just on the parties to the case, but on other officials of government, beginning with the president. Abraham Lincoln, though, as you know, vehemently disagreed with that idea of judicial supremacy, saying that to treat unconstitutional court rulings as binding in all cases, no matter what, no matter how usurpative, no matter how anti-constitutional, would be for the American people, and I quote now the great emancipator, to resign their government into the hands of that eminent tribunal. And Lincoln, of course, acted on this belief. He pursued legislation and signed into law legislation that restricted slavery in the federal territories. He issued passports and patents to black citizens who under Dred Scott against Sanford could not even be citizens. The Supreme Court said even free blacks couldn't be citizens. Was Lincoln right to defy the court on that? And would you as president do that with the Obergefell decision?
Lincoln was absolutely right. I agree with President Lincoln. And courts do not make law. That is not what a court does. A court interprets the law, a court applies the law, but courts don't make law. And, you know, this is an area of really striking divide in this presidential election. One candidate, Hillary Clinton, agrees with the court and embraces gay marriage and is happy that unelected judges have purported to tear down the marriage laws of all 50 states. On the Republican side, there are quite a few Republicans who, when the gay marriage decision came down, they described it as the settled law of the land. It's final, we must accept it, move on, and surrender. Those are almost word for words Barack Obama's talking points. And I think they are profoundly wrong. I think the decision was fundamentally legitimate. It was lawless. It was not based on the Constitution. I agree very much with Justice Scalia, who wrote a powerful dissent, saying this decision is a fundamental threat to our democracy. It is 5 unelected judges declaring themselves the rulers of 320 million Americans. And indeed, Justice Scalia, in the penultimate paragraph of his dissent, predicts, hearkening back to President Lincoln defying Dred Scott, that state and local officials will refuse to obey this lawless decision. It's remarkable to see a Supreme Court justice saying that will be the consequence of this. And you know, we really saw the height of the arrogance of the court just a few weeks ago when Justice Kennedy was at the Harvard Law School and he was asked a question by students about this decision. And his response, he compared the Supreme Court of the United States to the Nazis. And he said, how many judges do you think defied the Third Reich? And with a smile, he holds up his fingers and says 3. And it was a stunning statement, Robbie, for a sitting Supreme Court justice. This isn't me calling them the Nazis. This is Justice Kennedy calling the court on which he serves, calling the opinion that he wrote, analogizing that to the Nazi decrees that we must obey. That is an arrogance. It is an elitism. It is being out of touch with our nation. And I'll point out...
Just to be clear, surely Justice Kennedy was not embracing Nazism.
He drew the analogy. And the obvious implication was, just as you're forced to obey the Nazis, you're forced to obey us as well.
The law is the law. And if you don't like the law...
Even if we are tyrannical and oppressive. Now, look, certainly he wasn't embracing all of the horrible things the Nazis did, but to make that analogy, that is essentially saying we wear the jackboot and you must obey us. That is not the Constitution. There's nothing in the Constitution.